Hey, it's great to be on. Looking forward to hearing from everyone. Looking forward to this conversation. It's a year in. We're getting closer to conquering COVID. We're not quite there yet, but the teamwork and the way the communities come together is just extraordinary. But happy to see this get going.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to meet our volunteers, our wonderful team from all across this country. I'd like to acknowledge them all, from high schoolers all the way to seniors, even little kids, some of whom are joining their parents today on the call. And also joining us are some of our corporate partners who stepped in and donated generous resources to this initiative over the last year, and we thank them wholeheartedly. As an acknowledgement, I just want to start with a little land acknowledgement. I'd like to recognize that I live here in the GTA, where it's known as the dish with one spoon territory. And this is something really interesting that I just learned today. It's a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. The dish represents the shared land, and the spoon represents the individuals sharing the resources of the land in mutual cooperation. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Some of you may reside in different treaty or non-treaty lands, and each of us, from individuals all the way up to government bodies, have a responsibility to honor these treaties, amplify Indigenous voices, and hold ourselves and others accountable to our collective obligations and responsibilities. To that end, for the second round of Conquer COVID-19, after taking a break for a few months, we've regrouped on a smaller scale to sell our branded apparel again. And for the current round of fundraising, one of the organizations that Conquer COVID-19 is directing its resources to is called Call Auntie Indigenous COVID Pathways Hotline. And it connects Indigenous peoples in Toronto with culturally appropriate health and COVID-19 resources. There are also many other organizations and individuals that stepped up during the pandemic to fill different needs all across the country. We were just one of many. And Prime Minister, we thank you for joining us today to hear about our experiences across this country. I'd like to introduce Suleiman Ahmed now, who is the CEO of Conquer COVID-19, and he'll say a few words.
Thanks, Khadija. Thank you, Prime Minister Trudeau, for the invitation to speak with our team today. This week actually marks 1 year exactly since a group of friends were messaging each other on WhatsApp to launch Conquer COVID-19, and it grew beyond, I think, what any of us ever expected. One of our co-founders referred to us as a bunch of nobodies from nowheres because we're really just like thousands of other Canadians who stepped up to help each other when COVID-19 first impacted our country last year. Many of us got involved because we have loved ones who are working on the front lines in the medical community as nurses, doctors, PSWs, and there was a sudden and unexpected need for additional PPE. So a lot of us felt it was important to do something as a stopgap for those on the front lines who were impacted. We started by sourcing baby monitors because the doctors, many are on this call, told us that's what they needed to communicate safely with COVID-19 patients without burning through supplies of PPE unnecessarily. We started collecting them just by putting out the request on social media, and then people would drop them to our homes and we'd sanitize them. Then the demand grew for PPE supplies such as surgical masks, N95 masks, face shields, gloves, hand sanitizer, things I think many of us didn't really know before. Another key reason for our rapid growth was that our team managed to launch our website in about 2 days. I will say, Mr. Prime Minister, they are Maple Leafs fans who launched the website, so please don't hold that against them. And we created that with one doctor termed, Tinder for PPE. So click here if you have PPE to donate. Click here if you're, a doctor, nurse, PSW who requires PPE. So we were matching it up where we filled the need. À peu près environ une semaine après le lancement du Conquer COVID-19, lors de votre point de presse quotidienne à la télévision nationale, vous avez mentionné certaines de nos entreprises partenaires qui nous avaient permis de passer à le supérieur niveau. Et tant qu'un groupe de personnes sans histoire, peut-être peu après, d'autres Canadiens de renom et des entreprises partenaires nous rejoignent la cause. Plusieurs sont ici aujourd'hui. Nous avons également apprécié le soutien que nous avons reçu des dirigeants des autres partis politiques au niveau fédéral, provincial et fédéral et municipal. Ce qui a commencé par une t-shirt ennuyeux ou plate, c'était une jeune fille de 16 ans qui a créé pour le faire porter pour les bénévoles de notre groupe lors des collections d'épis. A fini à vendre à peu près 20 000 t-shirts et je crois que vous avez une aussi, Monsieur le Premier ministre Trudeau. Cette équipe a recueilli plus de 2,3 millions de dollars de dons qui ont été distribués, plus de 3 millions de pièces d'épis grâce à la générosité des Canadiens. When asked what contributed to our success, I would say, based on my experience, the biggest factor was the impact of women, and specifically women of color. They represented over half of our co-founders, the majority of our senior leadership team, and half of our volunteers. We all hail from across Canada with different races, religions, cultures, and creeds, but we have a common goal of helping others in need. So it appears that there is now a light at the end of the tunnel. In the meantime, our boring t-shirts and gear is back again for a limited time for two causes: LTC Frontline Food, which provides food to workers in LTC facilities as they take care of our elders. And the second is, as Khadija mentioned, Call Auntie, Indigenous COVID Hotline, which provides health and COVID-19 assistance to those in need within the Indigenous community. So with that, I'll ask, if you don't mind, Prime Minister Trudeau, if you'd be happy to share a few words. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Merci, mes amis. Quel plaisir de vous voir aujourd'hui. Quel plaisir de célébrer tous les travaux extraordinaires auxquels vous avez contribué depuis la dernière année. Khadija, Suleiman, thank you so much. So great to see you again. So great to be celebrating this milestone with you as we're a year in, but mostly so great to be able to say thank you and celebrate so many of the extraordinary volunteers who've stepped up over the past year. Now, in this pandemic has been the story of stepping up, not just through Conquer COVID, but so many Canadians have seen how they can get involved, whether it's because of the nature of their work as frontline workers or family members supporting people who are making sacrifices, or just good neighbors and good community members following the rules, being there for each other. We've really seen Canadians come together in an extraordinary way, which has been inspiring for sure, but has also been key to us getting through this better than many countries around the world. The fact that people pulled together in times of crisis, as opposed to hunkering down and hoping that they can make it through on their own, has really been the story of this pandemic in so many ways. The tragedies we've faced over the past year have caused us to reflect hard about how we need to build back better, how we need to continue to be better there for each other, particularly seniors, Indigenous, or other vulnerable peoples. But it's also been a really inspiring time of reminding ourselves of who we are and what we do when things get tough. And that is, we pull together and we reach out to our neighbors, we reach out across diversities, and we pull people together. And that's really been exemplified by what you've been able to do with Conquer COVID. The way this movement has grown, the amount of people getting involved, the resonance that it's had is truly remarkable. And I can't wait to dig into the stories that we're going to hear. Mais vraiment, je veux juste prendre cette opportunité pour vous dire merci. Merci pour tout ce que vous faites. Merci pour votre leadership et merci aussi de créer des opportunités pour tous les Canadiens de se sentir impliqués et engagés. This idea of empowering everyone to be part of the solution has never been more important than with COVID-19. And with what you've done, we all feel we have a stake in conquering COVID. So thanks for everything you're doing. And I won't say any more than this. I just look forward to getting into it with so many of your extraordinary team members and volunteers. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. It was thank you so much for your comments. We had a really difficult time selecting a group of volunteers to speak, but over the course of the next half an hour or so, we'll hear from about 6 or 7 of them. And we're starting in BC with Bindi Dile.
Hello, Prime Minister. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor to be here today. I wrote out a few words, well, actually a little more than a few words, and I think it's best I just read them because I'm very nervous. I can feel my heart beating in my throat right now. So some of the things that I experienced was people are feeling helpless, including us. Even though we work in an industry where we get to help everybody every day, majority of the people felt helpless. Most needed to feel like they could help. Conquer COVID-19 provided that opportunity, and we were able to bear witness, confirming each community is filled with compassionate, kind, and good humans. Our company is deeply involved with local community groups such as Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives, which helped the community come together immediately. We got the call from Solomon on April 9th, and 10 days later, we had a PPE drive in Vancouver, Victoria, and Calgary, quickly mobilizing in Western Canada. Our teams were extremely inspired and stepped up to volunteer in any way, even creating synergy with very competing companies coming together in alignment for the good of people. And we also were able to encourage the insurance industry as a whole for their involvement. Although we were not able to have the same impact and capacity here in the West as Ontario due to logistical PPE supplies, we did make a lot of people safe with the support of Ken Donahue at Safe Cares BC, who helped us with distribution, along with Mark Brandt, who provides dignified access to food security and the enormous donation from Canadian Tire, helping to keep the community safe. Lastly, this incredible experience inspired a group of young medical students who recognized a need to help women who are in challenging circumstances, further heightened by COVID-19. We are so proud of Catherine Gray and Lise Van Emmerom at a Canadian CWI, who continue to do their great work. And I know in the future, those are the doctors I want as my caregiver, because mine's about to retire. And in closing, I've noticed the increase in mental health, and that is where I want to know, how do I help? How do we, as the offshoot from the pandemic, has been a mental health issue? Thank you.
No, you're absolutely right, Bindi. Thank you for bringing it up. The mental health impacts of this pandemic are going to resonate a lot longer than the pandemic itself. There's no question about it. And what you highlighted, the fact that Conquer COVID gave a sense of agency and empowerment, that someone could actually contribute to a situation that seems so much bigger and vaster than any one of us, has been, I know, a real measure of resource for a lot of people, but there's so much more to do. I think we've learned a lot about how important it is to be there for each other as a community through this crisis. I just hope we stick together and we continue to be there for each other. As a government, we're investing, of course, in lots of mental health supports, but there's so much more to do, and it has to come from the community up, not just from the top down, and that's where we're going to keep this conversation going. But thanks for highlighting that, Bindi. Great to hear from you, and great to see Conquer COVID so strong on the West Coast as well.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you, Bindi. Shout out to our mountain and prairie volunteers. Sorry, we're going to skip over you because Akil, who is in the prairies right now, is bugging me via text, even though I've asked him to stop. We're going to skip right over you, Akil, and we're going to go to Jamie.
Prime Minister Trudeau, we're humbled that you're with us. Thank you for joining us today. And like Bindi, I feel grateful to be able to speak on behalf of so many volunteers who work tirelessly beginning about a year ago. I'll relate a quick story about my role as the so-called Northern driver. I was inspired to join Conquer COVID-19 based on a tweet that I saw from a paramedic in Timmins, Ontario by the name of Darren Rowntree. And his tweet essentially said that up there they were desperate for PPE. And I reached out to him directly and said, I will see that you get that PPE, and if I have to bring it up there myself, I'll do so. So a day later, I was able to meet with leadership from Conquer COVID-19, specifically Suleiman, And I told him that I thought it was critical, even though we could probably courier the supplies up there, that I go personally and that I take it personally. And one of the reasons I did that is because, as you probably know, many of the smaller communities in this country often feel ignored by the bigger communities. And here we were in the big center of Toronto. And I thought it was very important that they see my face in Timmins delivering that PPE. So within about a week, I had a packed Volvo full of PPE and made the 9.5-hour drive up there. And I will never forget pulling into the paramedic station in downtown Timmins and being introduced to this paramedic named Darren. And within about 5 minutes, there were tears in his eyes because I don't think he thought that we would follow through on our promise. And so at that moment, I realized that what we were doing collectively was necessary. If there was a shining light in the pandemic for me, it was that the baseball season was postponed. And frankly, I was out of work for a little while. And I had the gift of time. And along the way, thanks to the magic of social media, I was able to stop in on complete strangers who I'd reached out to on Twitter to deliver coffee to people in places like Smiths Falls and Listowel and a small village just outside of Timmins, and meet with people in isolation and find out how they were doing. So ultimately, traveling 8,000 kilometers over the course of about 2 months, as much as people had reached out to me and said, thank you to all of you at Conquer COVID-19, my response was, thank you for letting us be part of your lives, because there is great benefit to all of us being able to help you. My final drive was 15 hours one way to Thunder Bay to serve 2 First Nations communities there, Mattawa and Bingwe. And I saw firsthand how desperate they were for PPE. So once again, Conquer COVID came through in that respect. And it's not possible without all the people you're seeing on your screen here. So my gratitude goes out to them and to you for your leadership. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Jamie, that simple idea of being there for each other is sometimes not as simple as we'd like it to be in a country as big as Canada. So anything that brings us together, particularly in times of difficulty, is amazing. But you went really above and beyond in that. And it's just a great story, but a great example of even as we're isolated, that engagement and that connection is more important than ever before. And just people looking for ways to have that maximal impact. I mean, you'd been to all those places with your voice, with your sportscasts, but going there in person made all the bigger difference. So it's just wonderful to see you stepping up alongside so many others. So thanks, Jamie, for everything you've done.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Jamie. Honestly, I am not a baseball person. I know nothing about baseball, but I'm so happy to know Jamie only in the context of Conquer COVID-19. And he's honestly one of the most sincere and dedicated people I've ever known. And along with this next guy, who is also my bud, based out of Ottawa, Khalid Al-Ghazar.
Thanks, Bud. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau, ça va bien?
Ça va très bien, Khalid. Plaisir de te voir aujourd'hui.
C'est mon plaisir. Bon, ben, au nom des bénévoles de la région de la capitale nationale, je te remercie pour le temps. Je m'appelle Khalid Al-Ghazar. Je suis la personne qui a géré les efforts de Conquer COVID dans la région de la capitale nationale. Je suis un avocat et j'ai connu Suleiman et Khadija grâce à notre travail ensemble sur l'initiative No Fly List Kids. Bon, lorsqu'on a commencé à planifier l'approche pour notre région, on savait 2 choses. Il y avait de nombreuses personnes et d'institutions en besoin de EPI et qu'il y avait sans aucun doute de nombreuses personnes et d'institutions et d'organismes qui étaient disposés d'aider. Le problème, c'est qu'il n'y avait pas de connexion entre les deux. Fait que ce qu'on a fait, c'est qu'on a décidé d'établir cette connexion-là. Thanks to the generous support of our partners at St. John Ambulance, our local team held 4 successful PPE drives in Ottawa, where we collected tens of thousands of items from businesses and individuals alike for distribution in the community. I'd like to recognize Lisa Paul from St. John Ambulance, who's on the call today. Lisa and her team permitted us to use their facilities as a home base for our operations, and also provided valuable storage and logistical support for our drives. Our efforts got a massive shot in the arm on April 9th, 2020, when I and other members of our team received an email from Fiona McKean of the Ottawa-based Thistledown Foundation, letting us know that they would be donating $1 million towards our efforts, funds that we could then use to purchase and distribute additional life-saving PPE. I'd like to recognize Fiona and Megan Hanley from the Thistledown Foundation, who are on the call with us today as well, for their incredible support, not just in terms of funding, but also, frankly, the moral support that they provided to me and members of our team here in Ottawa. En ce qui concerne la distribution, on a concentré nos efforts ici à Ottawa sur les établissements de soins de longue durée, les refuges et divers autres organismes communautaires au service des plus vulnérables d'entre nous. Grâce au dévouement incroyable de notre équipe, on a pu distribuer des centaines de milliers d'articles à plus de 100 agences locales, de Renfrew à Hawkesbury, en passant par Cornwall où je suis né, et bien sûr ici même à Ottawa. Although this experience and each delivery that we made along the way was incredibly gratifying and an experience that I personally will never, ever forget, it did come at a significant cost to many of us. Having to balance our efforts and conquer COVID with other obligations such as work, family, studies, not to mention managing our own emotional and mental health, pushed many of us to our limits and has left us wondering whether as a country we can do things better to better prepare ourselves for any similar events in the future. And I trust that that's a conversation that will be happening at all levels of government. So to my team, this gathering is more about each of you than it is about me. So I thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart for all of the efforts that you made. Monsieur Trudeau, encore, je te remercie pour le temps.
Ben, merci beaucoup, Khalid, et c'est très, très bien. Nous devons d'être plus résilients dans l'avenir. On a appris des leçons. Il va falloir qu'on bâtisse là-dessus et c'est certain que les Canadiens, on est toujours là les uns pour les autres, mais c'est encore plus important et qu'on approfondisse ça comme société. Merci.
Je te remercie.
Wouldn't
I
be
need to unmute myself. There we go. Okay,
Exactly.
yeah. Thank you,
It
Khalid.
wouldn't be COVID if people didn't end up on mute from time to time.
Of course, it was bound to happen. We had a number of medical students who are also part of this initiative who stepped up big time last year. And we have here one of the medical students who was part of our initiative, Tate Newmarch, based in Toronto.
Hello, everyone. Great to see many new and familiar faces, albeit unfortunately still over Zoom. Thank you, Prime Minister Trudeau, for giving us the opportunity to share our experience. Your interest in our work is in itself an honor. My name is Tate Newmarch, third-year medical student at U of T, and I'll be speaking for myself as well as a conduit for the 10 or so medical students who are part of the project. So the beginning of the pandemic, as everyone is well aware, was an incredibly uncertain time. However, I believe as medical students, we were in a unique position in that we had developed some skills and harbored a desire to make a difference, but we were unequipped to truly help on the front lines. With allied health professionals working to keep our communities safe, Conquer COVID-19 became an initiative to make sure that they could continue doing just that. I don't think any member of the team could have ever envisioned the impact our group had when we first launched. Quite literally overnight, we were brought to the national stage. And in our minds, we would have been happy providing just 1 or 2 pieces of PPE to a healthcare provider who needed it. Thankfully, we were able to do a lot more. And to me and my colleagues, CC19 was much more than an organization that simply facilitated the donation of PPE to healthcare workers. It was a movement. Conquering COVID-19 was something every Canadian, regardless of race, political beliefs, gender, etc., could rally behind. For me personally, being part of the distribution team, I was directly involved in the development and distribution of lists and delivery of PPE to various locations. One time I was personally asked to drive to an orthodontic clinic in Saskatoon. However, I believe that was probably a mistake in our logistics. This position led to frequent interactions with physicians, allied health team members, and institutions who were very thankful for the work we were doing. In particular, there were numerous occasions in which clinics stated that they would not have been able to remain open without the supplies we were providing them. Hearing that highlighted the difference we were making and made it all worthwhile. However, unfortunately, many of the problems currently exist and new ones will continue to emerge, such as the disproportionate toll the pandemic has had on many of our less fortunate groups. Underlying problems have merely been exacerbated or highlighted by our current situation. I just want you to know we as U of T medical students will continue to find avenues to elevate our communities in need, most importantly with the interests and goals of members of such communities driving the conversation. I just want to say thank you again to all members of Conquer COVID-19 and Mr. Prime Minister Trudeau for all the work you've been doing and giving us the time to speak to today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tate. And, you know, there's so much in what you said. First of all, you know, medical students, medical professionals, healthcare workers, you've all made the choice many years ago that you wanted to serve, you wanted to be there to help people, but nobody was ready for this pandemic. The level of requirement, of sacrifice, of engagement that you've had to be engaged in because of this is above and beyond anything you expected or signed up for, and yet you rose to it and went beyond it with your engagement here as well. And that is something that is inspiring, both to everyday Canadians, but also to young Canadians who are looking for how they can have an impact on the world. So thanks for everything you do, and what you're highlighting around the uneven impacts of COVID-19 on BIPOC communities, on marginalized individuals is really, really important. And if there's a lesson that we've drawn from this, it's that we need to close those gaps in our social safety nets. We need to do far better than we have. Gaps that have existed for a long time, but that have really been highlighted by COVID. There's a lot of work that we all need to continue to do, even through and beyond COVID-19. But your words are exactly in the right place and taking us in the right direction. So thanks, Tate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tate. And it's actually a good jumping off point to Jen, who works extensively with the homeless community in Toronto through Seeds of Hope and other organizations. She's on the ground daily, befriending individuals and helping them, even just on her own, even not through organizations, and really an inspiration. So I'll hand it over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Khadija. I think I'm off mute. Thank you so much, Prime Minister. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to speak with you today. I can't thank Conquer COVID-19 enough for their tremendous support of Seeds of Hope over the first wave of the pandemic. They provided the charity and people experiencing homelessness with thousands of pieces of PPE, supplies for young mothers in our shelter, and that the charity runs, and much more. Seeds of Hope is a charity in downtown Toronto run by Kim Curry, an amazing executive director that deals with the needs of the most marginalized in this city and in this country, people who literally do not have anywhere to sleep. During the pandemic, the charity turned into a food production center, at one point producing more than 3,000 meals a week. Prime Minister, your government has done a tremendous job of ensuring most people were able to keep their homes, their income, and their lives, but our most vulnerable have fallen into a state of despair. The hunger crisis in Toronto is increasing. I asked members of two communities what they would want me to ask of you, people experiencing homelessness and people with disabilities. Both communities are suffering terribly right now. Elderly women should not have to ride the TTC all night in order to stay warm, and elderly men should not have to sleep in sleeping bags in parks. We need safe transitional options while housing is being built. Outreach workers in Toronto are very concerned that there will be mass evictions at camps in Toronto, while places like Kitchener-Waterloo have been very successful at making them work. Your pandemic measures have been excellent for so many, but the need among the most vulnerable, as you stated, is immediate. They are in crisis. They have lost places to go and sources of income, and that doesn't mean discomfort or loss of status for them. It means unimaginable stress and misery. Homelessness is another epidemic. We need immediate solutions and long-term solutions, including things that people have spoken about, a national housing plan immediately for 30,000 homes a year, a number that your father's government was able to hit from 1973 to 1993. A stipend of at least $1,000 a month for people living with disabilities, many of whom are living below the poverty line right now, and ideally moving toward a basic income that guarantees all people a minimum of $2,000 a month to live on. I have more detailed recommendations that Khadija will share with your office following this. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Jen, for your work and for being such a strong voice and advocate for people who often don't get heard and don't feel like they're resonating with society. You know, one of the things we knew from the very beginning as a government was, yes, we had to get supports like the CERB out to so many people who were in danger of not being able to put food on their table because they had to stay home and couldn't work. But we also recognized that there were a lot of people we were not reaching with that. And that's where we made investments in supporting community organizations and homeless shelters, but there's so much more to do, and it's more than just Band-Aids we need. We have a lot of initiatives on the go, but a lot more we need to do. And I look forward to working with you and advocates like you right across the country as we try to end chronic homelessness and support Canadians with disabilities far better than we have been in the past. So thanks for your continued advocacy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. We're now going to move to Quebec and Nadia Malik, who played a really pivotal role last year. I don't know how to even, I don't have enough time to describe how much she did for us, so I'll let her take it from here.
Thanks, Khadija. Bonjour, Premier Ministre Trudeau, mes chers collègues et partenaires contre COVID-19. Je suis vraiment honorée d'être ici parmi vous autres aujourd'hui. Je m'appelle Nadia Malik et je suis une exécutive chez Bombardier. Une nuit, au début de mars 2020, avant même que le COVID-19 soit déclaré pandémie par le WHO, j'ai reçu un texto d'une amie qui est médecin à Toronto et un des cofondateurs de CC19. Elle voulait m'ajouter à un groupe de passionnés dans WhatsApp qui voulaient faire une différence pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes. Une semaine après ça, le CC19 était né et pour cela, on est ici aujourd'hui. J'ai pris le rôle de stratégie de programme, la gouvernance et des partenariats. Et de plus, j'étais la représentante à Québec. Ce n'était pas moi-même. Il y avait un groupe en arrière de moi, mais j'étais la représentante au Québec. La situation au Québec en mars-avril 2020 était très fragile de celle du reste du Canada. Le reste du Canada a vu nos infections à COVID augmenter et nos aînés étaient au cœur de nos pertes. C'était une période vraiment douloureuse et anxieuse pour nous autres et moi-même aussi avec des parents qui sont vraiment âgés. La stratégie en conséquence était donc très différente à Québec. On n'a pas fait des PPE drives, on ne voulait pas être un super spreader de COVID quand on bataillait déjà une pandémie à Montréal. On a fait un partenariat avec le Foot Club de Montréal et avec donné la protection pour la distribution des PPE. Nous avons fièrement distribué plus de 100 000 masques et gants à travers Montréal. De plus, même quand les masques N95 étaient très rares au début de la pandémie, on a reçu un don de presque 1000 masques certifiés N95. These N95 masks were distributed to a local hospital that was bleeding COVID-19 and it was serving the patients. There was the head of imagery and of radiology that came out himself out of his shift to take receipt of those N95 masks. That was such an extremely special moment. Une autre histoire remarquable est celle d'un patient qui était atteint d'un cancer. Elle a été diagnosée en mois de mars. Quand elle avait pris connaissance de Conquer COVID, elle a commandé un boring t-shirt car elle voulait le porter lors de sa première journée de chimio. Elle attendait anxieusement avec aucun signe de le recevoir. Elle a contacté directement l'équipe de direction. Sans hésiter, tout a été fait pour lui emmener directement un t-shirt et elle a fièrement porté pour l'espoir lors de son premier chimio. Son histoire est devenue virale pour Conquer COVID et elle a donné un sens à notre organisation et à ce qu'elle représentait. The most important for me, because I am an employee of Bombardier Aerospace, became an initiative of when we wanted to honor victims of the Great Massacre that happened in Halifax, Nova Scotia in April of 2020. My company, Bombardier Aviation, approved the use of a Global 6500 to transport PPE to Nova Scotia. The aircraft was loaded at our manufacturing facility, plant in Downsview, Toronto, by our employees and the CC19 team, giving back to the community in a time where we were already trying to figure out how to manage our own operations and keep our people safe was such a proud moment for all our employees. That takeoff from Bombardier Downsview was as emotional as it can get. Truly a proud moment for me, my company, and for all of Canadians. To conclude, I'd really like to take the opportunity to thank Suleiman Ahmed and Khadija on behalf of the entire CC19 team and our partners. Without them, this initiative would have never kickstarted. With the passion and dedication of Canadians across the country, a group of nobodies, as Suleiman mentioned, we created a legacy in this historic time in Canada. Thank you so much for your time, Prime Minister Trudeau.
Merci Nadia, quelle belle histoire, quelle belle perspective. Merci pour ça.
Thanks, Nadia, and thanks for the shout out. Really appreciate it. But honestly, the honor for us has been to work with all of you amazing volunteers, and getting to know all of you has been just such a wonderful, I mean, it's made the pandemic so much easier. I know it's been hard for a lot of people, and it's been hard for us at times as well, but having this group of people to go through it with has been a real pleasure. I'd like to pass it now to Ahmed Hussein, who is actually the recipient, who was on the Halifax side, received the PPE that Conquer COVID-19 sent through Bombardier that Nadia just talked about, following the mass shooting in Nova Scotia.
Hello, Mr. Prime Minister, and thank you for coming on this call today. My name is Ahmed Hussein. I'm a dentist residing in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I'm very excited to share my story with you. To give context to how this all came about, the work really was a combination of circumstances. First, the fact that the pandemic was such a threat to seniors, especially those in nursing homes, was actually clear early on to me before it became the center of attention in the media, largely because of my wife, Bonnie Jean McDonald, who's a director for the National Institute on Aging at Ryerson University, a group that focuses on elderly issues. I knew there was not enough adequate preparations to handle the incoming pandemic. The sense of urgency was there. So when the opportunity came that Conquer COVID presented to me, it was clear that we needed to act fast. Fortunately, as a chair of the largest Muslim organization in Planet Canada, the Ummah Mosque and Community Center, I was able to do just that. We have over 10,000 Muslim attendees weekly prior to COVID, obviously. Young, energetic folks from all walks of life who really wanted to give back to Canada and their community. We get hundreds of volunteers whenever we do a community event. In fact, we fed over 4,000 frontline workers during the first wave. We've created 24/7 food banks and other initiatives to help alleviate the suffering and pain in Halifax and Nova Scotia. So we had a functioning network to move very quickly. So really, all the pieces were all in place to mobilize and help on a large scale when the opportunity presented itself. It was really about being in the right place at the right time with the right people and knowing how important it was to do the right thing and quickly. Unfortunately, as the donations from Conquer COVID was being finalized, the tragic event that struck Nova Scotia that was just mentioned had occurred, the Canada's worst mass shooting. Our plans changed, we pivoted, we decided to divert a significant portion of the PPE from nursing homes and the ICU to the Victoria Order of Nurses, where two of the victims of the tragedy worked at. I had met with the members of the family from both victims and watched personally Daxon, then 2 years old, help me move boxes out of my car of PPE to where his mother worked before being murdered. I have no words to describe what I saw and felt then, but I can safely say the strength the family showed me that day inspired me. I saw what Conquer COVID presented was more of an opportunity to help boost people's morales, an opportunity to show everyone a means of how to help and how to give back, a way to inspire and empower others. In the end, we've been so fortunate in Nova Scotia. The province has really come together to protect its seniors. Of course, we have our very strong leadership to thank for that. So I wanted to congratulate you and them on a job well done, but I also want to congratulate Conquer COVID-19, their leadership, the donors, the volunteers. It definitely is really heartwarming to think that we helped to potentially save lives by getting the PPE to where it was needed quickly. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Oh, thank you, Ahmed, for your words and for your leadership through what has been a very dark time. Obviously, COVID was hard enough as it was, but when the killing in Portapique set us reeling, not just in Nova Scotia, but right across the country, and the other incidents that happened throughout the summer and all the rise of challenges around anti-Black racism and George Floyd and some of the anti-Indigenous issues. It seems like there was a moment both of awakening by so many to the realities lived by our fellow Canadians, but also a desire and a need to come together and to say, okay, let this be the moment where we stop taking things for granted and we work actively to make things better. And Conquer COVID is emblematic of that, but each of you individually beyond Conquer COVID is emblematic of that, of people who are deciding to step up, to help their community, to be there for each other, to support people, whether it's 1,000 people or just 10. That's what Canada is, and that's what we need to continue to remember and put at the center of everything we're doing. You know, over the past while, people have sort of reached out to ask how I've been doing, but you know, the advantage and the opportunity I have of being able to serve a country like Canada through this difficult time is Canadians themselves, through Conquer COVID and 1,000 other individual or larger or smaller initiatives. People have come together to try and do the right thing and be there for each other, and serving Canadians as leaders, as you all are in various ways, is a lot easier when Canadians remain true to who we are, which is to try and be there for each other, to make it through a long winter, a long night, a long pandemic. It's in our identity culturally, but it requires leadership like you've all shown through Conquer COVID, to galvanize, to give people a direction and meaning and an ability to help out. So it is just such a privilege for me to say thank you, not just to those speakers, but to all of you for having been part of this.
Thank you, Prime Minister Trudeau, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and listening to all of our stories. And I'm going to pass it to Suleiman now for some closing remarks.
Okay, I was muted. There we go. Everyone's texting me right now. Nous vous remercions, Premier Ministre Trudeau, pour prendre le temps de parler avec notre équipe aujourd'hui. Nous remercions spécialement nos bénévoles, notre partenaire coopératif et les gens qui ont donné l'argent par tout le pays. We haven't quite conquered COVID-19 just yet, and we all need to be there for Canadians during the third wave. Whether it's donating or buying our boring gear, or supporting, more importantly, local charities or initiatives in our communities. I think we've heard a lot about that, about communities, and just continue to be there for our neighbors who need us in time right now. One of the best things I think about this team is that many have gone on to do other volunteer initiatives, helping those in need, in particular the youth on this call, which is really important. I welcome you to provide any other closing remarks, Prime Minister Trudeau, and feel free also to mention to my friend Greg Tilson how great the Montreal Canadiens are compared to his Toronto Maple Leafs. He really would love to hear that. He's taken a few shots at our team, but that's for a conversation later. But lastly, there's hope. And what I mean by that is I'm going to pass it along to one of our board members, Fatima Dada, and I'll let her take it from here, and she can unmute.
Well, I didn't prepare anything, but one of the little hopes is this little munchkin that was born 8 days ago, and you'll see she's wearing her little Conquer COVID t-shirt there, and it's her first public appearance, so she wanted to say hello, Prime Minister.
That is wonderful. Congratulations, Fatima. And thank you, Suleiman, and thank you, Khadija, and thank you all. Greg, we're all friends now, regardless of what hockey team we follow, as long as we're all Raptors fans, which I think we are. That's the important part right now. I think, what you said, Suleiman, was really important about young people, because we know that COVID-19 and this experience is going to mark all of our lives, but it's going to have hit young people at a critical time and at a crucial time, and could have longer term consequences in terms of delays in job market, delays in education, things like that. But at the same time, it has also been an opportunity for young people to see how important it is to be connected to community, to be getting involved, to be helpful, to be making a difference. And it's been a story of volunteering across the country through so many millions of Canadians who stepped up in so many different ways. And Conquer COVID is just one extraordinary example of that. But it is a really, really powerful one that, as you pointed out, has reached a more diverse group of Canadians than often organizations do. And that is incredibly valuable, to make sure that we are listening to and hearing everyone's stories that are different through this COVID challenge. you've mentioned it. We're not through. We haven't conquered it yet. There is a race going on right now between vaccines that are arriving by the millions and variants that are accelerating rapidly. It is a pivotal time for the next few weeks. I suspect, hopefully not too much longer than that, but we're all really going to have to buckle under, even though we're all sick and tired of COVID in so many different ways. We have to continue to be there for each other and continue to help people hang in there. Just a few more months till the snow is gone and enough people get vaccinated that we will not be as worried about those variants as we are now. But community leadership goes so much further in so many ways and resonating with people than even political or business or international leadership. So your voice is reaching out to neighbors, to community organizations, to your fellow Canadians is so incredibly important for all of us to get through this. So it is really a privilege for me to be able to say thank you to all of you. Merci pour tout ce que vous faites, tout ce que vous allez continuer de faire, pas juste pendant cette période de COVID, mais je sais que l'expérience que vous avez tous eue et que vous avez offert à tellement de Canadiens d'être impliqués va être quelque chose qui va caractériser vos vies pour les décennies à venir. Et sur ça, on est un pays meilleur à cause de ça. The habits that we've developed as volunteers through COVID-19 will make Canada a much better place over the coming decades. And Conquer COVID has had a real impact on that. So thank you all for everything you're doing. Keep up the amazing work. And I look forward to seeing you all again.
Thanks again, Prime Minister. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.
Merci.
Bye.
Bye.
And to